Okay. Well, hi everybody. So my name is Jan van Hellemond, and I have a very poor back. So I'll be sitting down every now and then. I hope you don't mind. And it gives a nice, cozy, like a bar-like atmosphere. I think. I don't do stand-up comedy, so just sit down. This is a title. What's that? Oh. There we go. This is the title of this talk. It's a bit of a joke. This talk is not about service worker, and I don't really think that service worker is a douchebag. Who knows, by the way, show of hands, what it's broadly what service worker is about? Okay, so there's quite a few of you. Well, again, this talk is not about service worker. Very broadly speaking, a lot of people probably either completely disagree or tell me that it's vastly incomplete. But service worker allows a new thing, a new API. It's coming in browsers. Of course, it's already in fancy Chrome, and it allows, amongst lots of other things, to do stuff offline. And that is what this talk is about: doing things offline. Service worker allows you to do that. I don't think it's a douchebag, it's just absent. So from most browsers, most mobile browsers, of course from iOS, it's not there yet. It'll be coming there, but it's not there yet. So how do you build something offline without it, is a talk. Now, of course, this talk is going to be completely useless as soon as most browsers do have service worker, because that will be the way that we're going to do it. So, this talk is not going to be about me showing how it should be done or something. Firstly, because I don't know how it should be done. And secondly, however we do it without service worker is going to be completely obsolete by the time we get to actually use service worker. So please do look into what it is. I like this. I'll put this slide up somewhere else so I don't have to memorize these URLs. I like this introduction to it. I think it's a good story to understand what it is, but there's lots of other resources there. Support, as you can see, is, well, it's in Chrome. What you can't see very well here on this slide is that the color green isn't the right color green. So that means, yeah, there's some support for it, or there's bugs, there's flags, and there's also lots of red. So service worker is not ubiquitous. We can't depend on it, and we can't say yet. We can't say for some time. We won't be able to say for some time that service worker has, gone the way of IE7. Yes, there's still about 3% in my stats users, but we can forget about those. We're not there yet, but we do like to build things that are available offline today. So what I would like to show you is how I've built something that works like that, and so it's more of a showcase or a demo than a technical talk. So I'll do a short introduction into this project, and then we'll just have a look at the thing, and I hope you fire lots of questions at me, and we can make this a bit of an interactive thing. So this is our client. We have, like Paul introduced me, I work at FontLab, and we do projects for clients. So we have a new client. No, actually, this is not our client, this is our client. And this is not that far from the truth, because the client is a political party. And I should make a disclaimer at this point that I do not personally or in any professional manner endorse this political party. Of course, I did take them on as a client, so I don't completely hate them. You'll be seeing lots of material and branding from this political party in this talk, because it's unavoidable. That's the product. So please don't, this is not some secret military style subliminal campaign. Political parties. Political parties organize conferences, party political conferences, and some of them have them every 10 years or something, and they're very rigidly organized, and they're really just, you know, show trials, and people have to show up and vote for the right things that the top brass tell them to vote for. Other parties are a bit more democratic, to use a word. They're a bit more of a free-form organization. There's an agenda, there's things that need to be decided upon, and you know, the day has a schedule. Sometimes there's 2 days to do it. Lots of people show up, and they need, on the day, they need information. They need to know where to go. There's various sessions. It's a bit like going to a conference or maybe even a meetup. You need to know where to go. There's all sorts of practical information that you need. And but you need, you could at conferences we, you know, at Frontiers, for example, we tend to put the most practical information, the schedule, the venue, things about. Well, things about food, people are always interested in, you know, when is the food, where is the food, how much food is there. For example, on the badge or little booklets that you give out. So, you know, paper. Now this client of ours, they used to do this as well. So their conferences, they would have a newspaper. That's what they call it, the Congreskrant, the conference newspaper. It would be printed as late as possible, because there's always information that changes, you know, in the last minute, last second. And of course, the second you print the first copy, it's dated, it's old, there's mistakes in it, and there's things that have changed. It's paper. So what do you do on the day of the conference itself? They hand out these little addendums, like you know, like a change set, a diff. On paper. It says, well, on page 7 it says, you know, we're going to have this talk, but it's going to be somewhere else because, you know, the guy died. On paper. Although it has these big drawbacks, that it's, you know, dated, it's old, it's inaccurate the second it's printed. They were quite attached to it. They really like it. And I can't any longer, of course, hide the. I've tried to. It's these guys, yeah. 66. We'll get to them. Yeah. So they asked us to build something for them. Of course, that's what we do. It's not a. It's not a. You know, it's obvious that you build something digital, something on the web. You can all access it, and it can be accurate to the second, and we can change stuff around. So they wanted us to build something that was useful for the attendees on the day itself at the venue of the conference. And they have lots of conferences, these Democrats, and so they do them several times a year. So something they can reuse every time. Please make it mobile, make it responsive, make sure it works offline. A bit of a footnote there, and of course, so this was a client who was under the impression, well, I have to hand it to them, they knew a bit about, you know, building applications. Yeah, it has to work without JavaScript. Not sure why exactly, but that's just, you know, well, we had to have one other requirement. It has to work. And of course, I always make the same silly joke. When people say it has to work offline, I say, okay, so what you're going to hand out USB sticks or floppies or you know, offline? Yeah, you can't use it over the web. No, okay, so it has to work online first, but then, so you download it or whatever, and then on the day itself, it's okay if you are online. If you are offline, it still works. Of course, you have to be online at some point to get the thing, whatever it is, to get the information, and then you can keep it if you're offline. The big benefit, of course, over paper, but also over native applications, because they had looked into having some native app store app built, is that you can push updates to it quite quickly. I know you can do that on native as well, but it depends on what kind of content, whether it's content or whatever you want to change, really the structure of the application itself around. Just on the web is there. Push it. Push content itself, and they wanted something with a simple UI. To put it as politically correct as possible, people who go to party political conferences do not tend to be very tech savvy or young. They had a rather well-defined, specific requirement for simplicity, not for simpleness, but for simplicity, something that is intuitive. These are all design aspects. I'm not a designer, so let's go to the next slide. Being the party that they are, they also had very strict or stringent requirements about privacy. The thing has to be private. You're going to a political conference, you're voting on things. These votes are, well, most of them are by show of hands, but not all of them are. And, you know, you don't want this information to leak. You don't want any tracking. We decided we weren't going to do any cookies as well, because they were then and still are quite the contentious topic. And they had at some point had a native application for iOS and Android in the app stores. They had that built, but the application asked for lots of permissions. Well, so on iOS it asked for permissions, and on Android, of course, it took the permissions. But you could look that up, you know, what can this or what may this app do? And it had this long list of permissions. This was because what they had actually done is they went to an agency, a company, that had already developed like a white label, that's what they call it, white label application. And this application could do lots of things. And it could do lots of sharing of things. And it could do lots of tracking of things, and it could do lots of location-based things. And of course, for their instance, so the branding that they gave to it, they said, well, we'll not use the location, we'll not use the tracking, we'll not use all the sharing, but the app still asked for the permission. So you go to a political party's conference, you're using this app, and the app asks, you know, I need access to your contacts, and I need access to your location, I need access to your, I don't know, search history, stuff like that. We're going to use the unique identifier of the device, and, you know, have a great time voting on all these really sensitive subjects. So they had this in the native app, and this was, you know, a bad thing for them. Whether or not it is a bad thing or not, it doesn't matter. This is the perception is we cannot use this for this particular application because of this. I love how it says identity, contacts. Okay, location is off, and then also additional permission. I've given away my identity. What else? So what we built for them was a web application. So offline, mobile, responsive, all of that. And we built it using lots of various components, surfaces, platform stuff, and we hooked all of it. Of course, as projects go, we didn't have that much time to put it all together, and there wasn't a huge amount of money for it. So we took some services that were available and hooked them all up. You might get the impression that we built something like this, like a dangerously overheating Christmas tree of things connecting to each other with lots of, you know, single points of failure, multiple points of failure, as I like to call them. So bear with me. What we built had this vague structure. Using the site leaf CMS, have anybody heard of site leaf as a CMS? One of you. Okay, that's great. It should be. Oh, Sideleaf is wonderful. It's, especially if you're building, if you're a front-end developer, you'll like the idea that it's or the concept that it puts together. CMS, of course, they put content in it. We put templates in there, HTML or templates. I should have said code, just code. And then Sideleaf generates a static website. In this case, in an S3, Amazon Web Services S3 bucket. And then I had a look at this website. It's a website, it has a URL, you can go there, it works. I had a look at it and I didn't quite like it. So we put it through a Lambda function, which is just, in this case, take that website, do things with it, put it in another bucket. And the things we did with it was, well, minification, gzipping, for example. So now we have an even better website, smaller, more performant, but it's still a website. Not quite done yet, because we put it through, this is not the third bucket, this is the second bucket from the previous slide. Put it through CloudFront, which is a CDN, which makes it just a bit faster. Don't really get much benefit of CDNs here in, especially here in Amsterdam, with the biggest internet exchange, M6 here in Amsterdam. And Frankfurt, the even bigger one, so close. So this, you know, the global distribution. We're having this event. Last time it was in, I think we built it for their conference in Rotterdam. Everybody is there. On the other hand, we have global distribution of the. CloudFront handles HTTPS, so it terminates SSL. So we can have publicly SSL. HTTPS connections, and then anything that happens after, so in this case before you reach the actual web server, it doesn't need to have SSL to get back to the endpoint. And then it reaches the internet, and then it reaches the clients, the browsers. So that's quite a stack, and all of these parts do stuff, but that's still not the application itself. To do all that, built a lovely build script with colored output. Particularly proud of that. Oh, and emoji. Build and deploy. So now we have a really fast system. We've connected all these things together, and every time that I hit this script, either build or deploy, new version of it goes all over the world, so that everybody in Rotterdam can use it. And we have that there. Now, what did we build? So, this is where the theme of the evening, progressive enhancement, comes in. We built two versions, one on top of the other. We've enhanced the classic version. Now, the classic version was a website. Remember those? When you have a page, and then you have a link, and you click the link, and you go to another page. And then, on the other page, you have a link, and you can either go back, and then when you've gone back, you can go forward again. A website. Lots of pages. We'll have a look at it in a minute. Just simple, nothing fancy. Works without JavaScript. Doesn't work offline, of course. But if you build the HTML and the CSS properly, nicely responsive, then HTML is responsive. You know, you don't have to do anything. HTML is always responsive. CSS, yeah, if you do it well, we've almost hit all the targets. That whole tech stack in front of it meant we were, you know, satisfying the security requirements, very private, not using cookies, no tracking, everything over SSL, classic website. But then we added something to it, the modern version. We actually did in the code name these classic and modern. The modern version is a viewer. The modern version is a single page application, there it is, a viewer, and what it does is it retrieves the content, HTML content, from the good old classic website, and it displays it in exactly the same way, having the benefit, of course, of once it has retrieved it, to be able to store it in a cache. And if you store it in a cache, you can show it from the cache. Every time you want to see any content that you've already navigated to, you get it from the cache. And if it's new, or if it's expired in the cache because it's old, some content like they had kind of like a timeline of tweets like timeline. You don't want to, this list, you want to refresh it continuously. Every couple of minutes a new item would appear. Other things like short bios of people that were candidates for certain functions, you could vote for them. Yeah, well, we're not going to change that much on the day, so they can have long times to live, long lifespans. But even that expires. The people didn't expire their bio. That would be awkward. But you can retrieve all that, and then if you don't have any connectivity, this still works. You can still retrieve from the cache and display in the browser. So now we're kind of offline-ish. Of course, this cache, I thought at first, well, every browser has a cache, and caching is one of the oldest mechanisms of the web, and lots of fancy things you can do there with special, conditional requests and HTTP headers that do either validate or invalidate caches and stuff like that. So I had a look at using the browser cache and taking things from the browser cache, displaying them when you're offline, which should kind of work because that's why you have a cache, right? To not have to retrieve things again when they've not expired yet. So this cycle, you want to look at some content, check the cache if it's there. If it is there, check if it's still fresh, render it, and if it's not fresh, retrieve a new version of it, kind of in the background, and then do it again, and keep doing it. Using the browser cache. Well, I thought that was a good idea. All browsers have it, mobile browsers have it, but turns out browser cache is a bit of a douchebag. So the browser cache, what you always try to avoid when you're building anything. Have you cleared the cache? Oh, no, I haven't cleared the cache. The same problems you have when you're developing and you hate the cache because it's always there and you're looking at old stuff. You don't want to look at old stuff. Who wants to look at old stuff? You have the same problems when you're actually trying to use it to your benefit. The browser's cache is very unreliable actually. You have no idea about how big it actually can be, and when things are in there, are they in there forever? If they have, if they came in with headers that instructed the browser to keep them for a certain time, does it mean that it will be guaranteed to keep it until that time, or does it purge it before? The browser cache is really unreliable, so can't really use it. So, build it yourself. Looking at lots of other tools, what do we have in the browser to store things that we've retrieved and want to have available offline and later without having to go back and use the internet connection to retrieve them again. We have IndexedDB. Who has properly used IndexedDB? Oh no, I mean, okay, not looked at the documentation, typed some code to use IndexedDB. Okay, a few of you, yeah. This is can I use, and it tells me support for IndexedDB. Well, it's a lot greener than what was the other one?
Service worker.
Thank you, service worker. And also the right kind of green, lots of right kind of green. And also a couple of... thing is, this is a bit of a lie, and they know it at Can I Use because we have these footnotes here. What they mean is that on iOS, trust me, there is no IndexedDB on iOS. It has bugs that render it completely useless. You cannot use IndexedDB. Okay, maybe they fixed it in the latest, what is it, 9.2 now? No, you're shaking your head and they haven't. No, oh, we're doing it, it's only Apple. And so we don't have Okay, do we have something else? Well, the thing about... okay, you get the gist. There's something that is older and it's actually officially deprecated now, but it's WebSQL. So it's kind of the same thing. It's a browser, it's a database in your browser. You can talk to it using SQL, SQL, and at least whatever it is, everywhere else, it's green in this label. So on iOS, it's the right kind of green. We can use that there. And maybe if we don't have IndexedDB, or it's so buggy that we can't use it, and we also don't have WebSQL, then we always still have good old web storage, local storage, session storage, and this is almost all green, except for Opera Mini, which just, I don't know, they don't like green or something.
Well, their logo is red.
Yeah, exactly. Red as in no. Well, it's a completely different thing, Opera Mini. It shouldn't really be in these. I mean, it wouldn't be fair to compare it in this way. So let's pretend this is entirely green. So at least we have that. The thing about local storage is the actual storage capacity is not that big. So in IndexedDB you can put lots of stuff in there. You can put, I think it's limited only by things like disk space and something, and well, I'm sure there's settings for it somewhere, but it's in the region of, well, megabytes. Whereas in local storage, at least, you're talking hopefully kilobytes and maybe a megabyte. But also, local storage on mobile asks for permission, which is very polite. But it's exactly the kind of, almost scary little dialogues, like, are you sure you want to allocate 5 megabytes to this, that you try to avoid. So, support is great. You don't really want to use it because it's maybe too small, and it pops up these scary looking, no, not really scary, dialogues asking for permissions. In comes local forage. Local forage, it's not a typo. It's a, let's call it a tool, library, whatever you want, by Mozilla, and it unifies these 3 types of storage in your browser. So it tries to use IndexedDB if it's there. There's a nice feature detect, of course. It knows about IndexedDB on iOS, so it also knows not to use IndexedDB on iOS. Falls back to WebSQL on iOS if it's there. It's almost only on iOS there, and it uses local storage in a IndexedDB kind of way if it's there. So this unifies it. It's a bit like good old jQuery. You code against one, what do you call it, surface API, and it trickles down. It uses the storage that it can use, and it unifies the point of contact. So local forage. So now we have something in our browser that we can talk to, and it will store stuff for me, and I can retrieve it back using keys, code against it. Wonderful. I always put this in my slides. This is the point where I'd like to show you the actual application, and otherwise I forget. Yes, it's it, guys. So again, I'm not endorsing anyone. I'm just too lazy to take the branding out of the demos. And otherwise it would still be all black and green and you still recognize it. And it's not a secret or anything. So this is the thing we built. Yay! Good old little, I'll put this out of the way, not to distract you. Good old little website. We have the program there. Go through the various rooms and halls where they have the conference. This is what happens later on in the evening. Yes, they have a lovely party. Yay! Look, they actually have a sub-program. So it starts, but it says here "Morgen Autobahn." So they might have some more actual work to do during the drinks, and then it's done. These are the things they vote on. They've voted on most of these things. Menu, it's nice and responsive because you can have we have this menu when we need it. We have the full navigation when there's room for that. Things move up a bit. Wonderful. But what happens if we're offline? So the way this thing works is, when you, this is what I want to show. Have a look at the URL. Hash Moses. And if I go somewhere, there's still that hash, and if I, looking myself out here, a bit more, yep, go somewhere else. So what happens is that really what you're looking at is one page, which has the URL slash, and then everything after the hash, of course, if you know, as you know, it doesn't really cause any real navigation to happen, but it is an event that is triggered, and then there's code, picks up this event and says, okay, now I have to display some other content, so we go and get it. But going and get it is something that we can't do if we're offline. So we first try to get it from our cache, and if it's not there, then we try to go and get it, and if we're offline, well, then there's no way to get it, so we have to communicate this, and if we do find it in the cache, we can display it. So how does it end up in the cache in the first place? Well, every time you are online, this is why I always make that stupid little joke about you can't really be offline unless you distribute your application using floppy. You start off online, and then of course you can retrieve whatever you want. So we have a little list in this application, and it knows the things that are probably popular, topmost content in the navigation. Retrieves all of this on the first go. As soon as you go there, this all happens in the background, fills the cache with it, and the content is now in the cache, and when I want to look at it, so if I navigate, I click on these things and they're just links. There might be images in there, these are SVGs. We've kept it quite simple, so there's no video, there's no audio, there's no like external, what could it be? Oh, there's fonts, of course. There's a couple of fonts, because this is a nice what do we call it now, web font. These things are retrieved from the cache first. The cache is either IndexedDB or WebSQL or local storage, and this makes it actually quite fast. Because as I navigate around, you may notice, I hope you do, things are actually quite fast. In fact, when we tested it a bit with a couple of the users, we had the following problem. When you are looking at this menu, you click on the link, the menu goes away again, but the content is already there. And people didn't notice, because of course the design looks similar. So maybe for this the schedule of the day doesn't look so good, but then we have this and we have this, actually quite similar. So they say, okay, I'm here, I click here, the menu goes up, but nothing happens. No, it's already happened. It's too fast. So maybe we should have, if we had more time or more budget, we should put something in, exactly, a spinner, something. Yeah, it's actually a very important thing in interaction design. You don't have to. I say we've reached the singularity. Where you used to have to give some feedback to the user that stuff was happening. Well, if you build your application correctly, you now have to give some feedback to the user that it's already happened. That's how quick things go. Meanwhile, all of this content is being displayed, but we're also looking at the caching headers. So as this content is retrieved and comes in, we can inspect, because we do all this over good old XML HTTP requests. We can look at the, what is it? Cache control header, the max age directive. Look it up. I mean, caching, HTTP caching is you could write many books on it. You can read many books on it. It's a whole world to itself. The max age directive from the cache control header, and I and really not all of these things at all, really. This tells us how long we can keep things in cache before we should consider them not fresh. It's not the same as stale. Stale means we know this is old. Not fresh means we don't really know whether this content is still fresh or not. So, for example, if we're looking at well, this list may have changed in the meantime, but when the content for this list came into the cache, it came with a header, and the header said max age something in seconds, which meant 300 seconds, which I think is 5 minutes, right? Yeah. Means for the next 5 minutes, don't worry, this is fresh, you're good. We keep checking these things, so every time I go away, come back here, of course we can display it quickly from the cache, but in the background we're looking at, okay, is this still, you know, when did this come in? When should it have expired? Has it? And if it has, we can retrieve, if we are online, retrieve a new version of it. Server will probably tell me, because these things don't really change that often, server will probably tell me, no, you're still good, so we do a conditional request. That's it's not that much, but there's quite a lot of code that went into that, and we can replace this content. So if something changes, you go there, you look at the old thing, and maybe there should be a bit of communication to the user about that, saying, okay, you're looking at something that is old, it's probably still good, but in the meantime we're trying, because you might be offline, to go and get a new version of this. That's how this works. So how is this a progressive enhancement? I asked. Well, remember, and I'll try to do it now. If we, for example, go offline. Do you know about this trick, by the way, in Chrome? Really? Going offline without actually turning off your Wi-Fi. Wonderful. So now we're offline. Yeah, still there. Yeah, still there. Yeah. Let's see. What did I click on? Yeah, this is still there. This. The Penningmeestersbijeenkomst. Oh, that was a party. Hey, nothing happened. It's not here. Let's see. Kandidaten. Yeah, we've been here before. This guy. Hey, nothing happens. I click, nothing happens. Okay. What's going on here is, so I'm looking at stuff in the cache. I'm looking at stuff that I've either seen before, or that was on that list of things that were going to be retrieved, you know, bootstrapped, you call it, prefetched, you could call it, into the cache the first time. But if I'm now offline, going to somewhere, you know, wanting to look at content that's not in the cache, and I'm offline, well, there's nothing to show me. Of course, there should be a nice message that says, hey, you're offline, we don't have this in the cache, so maybe come back for it later. You could even remember this is where you wanted to go, and then when you are online, detect that, go and retrieve it quickly, because obviously that is something you wanted to see. We didn't build any of that in here, but we could at some point. If there's more time and you know, money for it. So now we're offline. Okay, that's one thing. We can even go a bit further and go not just not offline, never. Okay, if you ever do use that trick of using the dev tools to go kind of like full offline without having to turn off your Wi-Fi, do not forget to turn it back on. That's oh, it's broken. It's only me. It's only my laptop. What's going on? Yeah, no, it works fine in Firefox.
Experience. I guess it works with Kotlin because it's still sort of works. You're just waiting a lot.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, there should be like a big icon or something that says, hey. Let's go disable JavaScript. Yeah, so, no JavaScript. So we can't load any content from the cache, that's all JavaScript. But, oh god, I knew this would happen.
Live demos.
Load, damn you. Am I still throttling? Am I still offline? Okay, so there's only one way to find out. Yep. But I think we do still have no JavaScript. Also something you don't want to forget that you've turned on. Yeah, disable JavaScript. So no JavaScript. But hey, we do kind of have JavaScript. Oh, there's an icon. What does it mean? JavaScript was blocked. Yeah, no kidding.
Is it the cache, perhaps?
Probably app cache, the other douchebag.
Can help you.
Okay, so this part of the presentation is going to fail me. No JavaScript. Gonna give it one more go. Oh, that was really nice. Signal. We're back. Yeah, we're back. One more go.
Perhaps in Firefox with JavaScript.
Exactly. Yeah, then I have to turn it off there. No, okay, so let's skip this. I wanted to show you how it works as a regular website, as it falls back to good old. Trying to bust the cache here. No, how's Wi-Fi doing? No. Okay, in the meantime, I prepared this talk up to this point, and I thought, well, there will probably be lots of questions by this point. So let's have them. I could show you the code. I could show you. So there we go. Thank you.
Would you say we need to build websites on this way by default, or is it only for like not content-heavy websites, including like videos and other heavy stuff?
So there's a lot of stuff that we didn't do, and if the client asks us, we say, well, we need to keep things simple. And if you ask me now, it's because these things are very complicated to do, and it would have taken a lot of time. So, for example, we have a really simple navigation. And let's turn stuff on again and just have a look at it.
Ik ben bang dat hij het echt niet doet. Ik heb het even geprobeerd net op een ander apparaat.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Settings, so deep. There we go. Okay, let's try something local. Nope. Maybe. Very lucky. Settings. Perils of live demos. Yay! Something's back. So all of these pages kind of look the same. You have your header. There's not even a footer, and then there's we put it in the main element. There's content there. So you can easily, when you navigate somewhere, and navigation always happens by clicking real links, good old anchors with href attributes. Of course, we capture those. We can always take the content and replace whatever is in the main element with the new content. So very simple navigation. And then whatever happens on top, it just stays the same. So this whole block. Oh, well, there it is. It never changes. If you don't have that, if you have something that's a bit more dynamic, or if you have like a deeply nested navigation, you will want to indicate where you are within that navigation. So you have to introduce something. Of course you can script that. Introduce something into that, introduce some complexity to indicate that. Saying, well, okay, I've now clicked this link, rather than just going to that page and building it server-side from a template and just displaying it. So we now have to go and retrieve the content for it. But it can't go here. For instance, what if you have like a sidebar that also has content in it, and it changes with the context of the main content. So now you're balancing, doing the same thing for two containers, and you still have to keep your navigation up to date. So that adds a whole lots of complexity. So the only answer, the best answer always to that question is, it depends. For simple things, yeah, and it's a nice, at least it's a nice thought process to have that constraint. I liked having that constraint because it meant there's a lot of things that we probably shouldn't have done anyway, where we said, well, this adds too much complexity. And I think, at some point it becomes an excuse. But just before that point, I think the user also benefits from it. Thinking about, do we really need to add this? Because it's going to add a lot of complexity. And, what's the value of it for the users? Stuff like that. We have things in here. Won't work now because I turned the JavaScript off, where you can navigate to these things and do, it says toevoegen mijn selections. You can bookmark parts of the website, and then you can filter lists, like showing all of these proposals to be voted on at the conference, or just showing the ones that have not yet been voted on. So this filtering and stuff like that, sorting these lists and keeping track of bookmarks in local storage, so not real bookmarks, not using cookies, not having a session state. It adds some complexity. So we said we didn't want to build a good old single page application and everything is templated client side and we have some big library, React, Angular, we're going to need something there. No, we're not going to do that, but then, kind of these complexities did creep in with these requirements for bookmarks and it's a personalization without tracking, without cookies. It's tricky.
If you are very limited by the size of the assets that you can store, how are you still able to store a full website? Because that is probably what you're doing, right?
Thank you for asking that. Back to the slides. Oh, I missed one. What I wanted to show you. Okay, it's gone. Is that as the yes? So there's a size limit. There's a constraint there. We don't exactly know where it is. That's spooky. That's scary. But there's a limit somewhere, and at some point we're going to put a bit more into the cache. And the cache mechanism, which remember can be either IndexedDB, WebSQL, or local storage, which has a very low limit, is going to say, no, that's it, I'm full. And then what do? Hopefully you get a nice something, a trigger, an event that tells you this. Maybe you can detect it, maybe it's an error you can trap, and then we have to throw stuff away to make room. What do we throw away? Well, whatever is there, whatever is the oldest. How do we know the oldest? Well, we have to put that kind of timestamp into the key. More complexity. So yes, if you have a browser cache, for example, is of course also limited, but the constraints are much. The limit is much higher, and you can always add more disk space or something to that limit. Nobody does, of course. You could. At least you know something's happening, and the browser cache takes care of all of that, throwing out things that are the oldest. You may have your own limits, your own settings in your browser that says whatever, everything that's older than 30 days, throw it away. Yeah, that's true. So there's a limit there. All of the content, we try to measure it. It's quite difficult actually. So we try to, somebody, I think on their iOS phone, iPhone, went to emptied everything, emptied all of the caches and local storage from all of the other websites. It's quite interesting to have a look at this, or surprising or very embarrassing to look at all of these sites, all of your history. You think you've thrown away your history, but you haven't. So we think we got the device down to empty caches all over the all over the board, and went to only this application, clicked on all the links, went through the whole navigation, all of the images loading, all of the text, all of the content, and then have a look at, okay, how big is this thing? I think the very biggest we had was around 4 megabytes. So that's the whole thing, and it includes the application itself.
So do you load everything asynchronously? Do you first load the HTML, the CSS, JavaScript, everything to work, and then worry about the images?
So
If you're on
are they images? They're not that.
there's SVGs and there's images. There's the
The photos, right?
And
photos.
are the SVGs embedded, or are they embedded in the HTML? Or
Some are, but they are retrieved separately.
because how would you save it in local storage? How would you save assets?
Well, everything that comes in,
Storage,
content, is either text, so HTML, which is text format, or SVG, but that's also text format.
Yeah.
So it's just a string of text. Or it's an image, which is a binary format. And then we've limited ourselves to simple PNGs, small, but it shouldn't really matter in JPEGs, or JPEGs actually, but it shouldn't really matter, these are quite small. The thing is, if you put really long strings into things like local storage, maybe even with SQL, InDexDB is fine, you may hit a limit. And I think the local storage library kind of tries to handle that by splitting these things up and splitting them over multiple keys, but you have a thing there, kind of works. So I thought, yeah, we could make this smaller because text. Here's the thing. I thought so. These 4 megabytes that we measured, and that we measured that for one of the earlier conferences, and later they had another one, and it was kind of bigger, and we had lots more candidate images. So I thought, well, 4 megabytes, it's still a lot. I thought it was quite a lot, and I thought, looking at what was going, over the line, looking at my dev tools, thinking 4 megabytes, how can it be that big? Because there's only like a couple of kilobytes going here. Then it hit me. What's going over the line is gzipped, but as soon as it reaches your browser unzips it. So of course, because if it's zipped, it's garbled. You can't handle that. So if you do an XML HTTP request for something that is gzipped, it's only gzipped while it's in transfer. So once you get it, retrieve it, and do something with it, for example, putting it into a cache somewhere, it's unzipped. So I thought, can we zip it again? Or can we at least compress it? Use the library, LZ, strings. It's very tricky, I'm Googling something live now. Okay. String in it while you.
Can be embarrassing.
Yeah. You know what's embarrassing? Wi-Fi. Library, and it does LZ, which is kind of like almost the same, well, let's call it family of algorithms that is used in gzip, but you can use it from JavaScript. So it's a JavaScript tool that can compress images or any data down, binary data and text data. And of course on binary data, especially if it's a JPEG, you don't get that much compression because it should already be quite compressed. And if you use PNGs, you should maybe get like 2% compression, which add a lot of complexity, all this code, and of course it takes a bit of time. And for example, I mean, we don't have it here, but it should be that if you try to compress an MP3, for example, the compressed version will actually be bigger than the uncompressed version because you're adding headers and you're adding a bit of yeah, headers, I think you call it, identification tags. So a couple of bytes on the front, a couple of bytes in the back, and the idea is everything else will be much smaller anyway, but proper, yeah, it's the Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi is going.
Nothing wrong with my application.
Well,
But it should work without internet. Should work without Wi-Fi. It should work without internet, right?
It was there, you were looking at it.
The live
Either offline or no JavaScript. Can't have one. Indie Wi-Fi? Oh, they turn it off after I die. So compressing strings before they go into the cache and uncompressing them using this library when they come out again. And of course the net benefit, you only get the net benefit if you compress a lot of things, because the library that you use to compress things is, you know, so many K.
It kind of sounds like the caching mechanism should take care of zipping stuff that's in the cache and not like using an additional library. But then again, we cannot change the caching mechanism, we can only change our code. But sounds kind of weird that we have to gzip stuff before putting it in the cache.
Yeah, it's true. I thought it, and probably as it stores it, the actual storage of IndexedDB, which is on disk or maybe memory, I don't even know, depends on the browser. Maybe that is very efficient and uses some sort of fancy compression mechanism. But then again, that's at rest, so it's compressed at rest, compressed in transit. But as I'm handling it in between, of course it's uncompressed because I'm going to use it in raw. So we added our own.
Thank you. Still
One more? Come on, Paul, one more.
last one. It's a short one. In the offline part of your demo, you clicked on a link which wasn't cached.
Yeah.
Isn't it a small effort to show some feedback?
Sort of preempting your question.
Yeah.
Yes, and yeah, it's quite simple. There's the timeout issue.
Oh, of
So
course.
if your browser knows that it's offline,
Mm-hmm.
and then it'll just you do an XML HTTP request for this content, and you know almost immediately, no, so we know that we're offline. It's not going to happen. If your browser doesn't know that it's offline or that the device is offline, or maybe it's not offline but the connection is so slow that it's never going to happen, then you need to build in a timeout. So you need to decide, okay, when are we going to give up on this? And then there's another timeout, because you don't want to bother the user with these messages every time they click the link. But maybe only after a second, you want to say, okay, we're still trying to get this. Maybe after 3 or 4 seconds you say, okay, this is probably not going to happen. And after 5 seconds you give up and you have a proper error, or you know, you have a nice. So all of that UI, all of that interaction, that was never built. Yeah, it's a shame. Okay, well, thanks, sir.